Today's session. And from Cape Kennedy tonight, NASA announces that the launch countdown for a new Nimbus weather satellite is proceeding smoothly. Officials at Goddard Space Flight Center near Washington, D.C. report that a successful launch will bring to 49 the number of their active scientific satellites in orbit. And now on the sports scene, we find that the Boston Bulls...
The night air is filled with voices, data, the voices of men, the voices of instruments, telling of positions, telling of discoveries. That's the business of NASA's 3 basic tracking networks, and the work of all their stations around the world passes through this building near Washington. In the control center of the Earth's satellite tracking network, the controller is counting down stations for tonight's Nimbus launch.
T-minus 120 minutes. Condition green. All stations submit readiness reports.
The mission of each network is to determine the position, speed, and direction of its spacecraft, to command all of the spacecraft's maneuvers and functions, and to tell it when to send back the information it has gathered. A few rooms away, computer teams are verifying the performance of another network for another mission, Apollo, manned flight to the moon. At midnight, they will switch over their computers to support the Nimbus launch. Further on, you reach the Voice and Data Switching Center for the world of tracking, NASCOM, NASA Communications. As the late shift begins to arrive, a controller for the Deep Space Tracking Network calls into voice control from the west.
Okay, Jim, take California, I'll take San Diego.
Roger. Voice control, go ahead, Pasadena.
Can we have the full Deep Space Network on conference, please?
Roger, JPL, stand by one. London, got it, boys.
London, you're calling?
Roger, London, Madrid, please, BP1.
All right.
Voice control.
This is Madrid.
Roger, Madrid, setting up at JPL.
All right.
Voice control. When you sit here, your fingers reach in 220 directions. You can create one vast worldwide conference or up to 40 separate conferences without any noticeable loss of quality. The equipment is deceptively simple in appearance, but no iceberg ever showed less of itself on the surface.
Roger, JPL. I have your circuit set up for Johannesburg and Madrid this time. You can go ahead with your conference. You're early.
Yeah. Hey, looks like Christmas tonight.
Well, you couldn't be early enough for me. She's all yours.
Is Alaska voice or data?
That's a data circuit.
Got it. Voice control.
In the world of tracking, there is no night or day. The networks never sleep. Beyond voice control, torrents of teletype messages and high-speed data flow soundlessly through the faceless cabinets of the communications processor. An automatic computerized switching system monitored by experts who direct an invisible electronic ballet. On high-speed magnetic drums, 1 million words a minute come and go as electrical charges. The computer can read hundreds of addresses, route them, select circuits, and fire the messages out around the world in the time it takes you to blink. For years, some of the best engineering brains in the country have been building and improving this communications network to its present state of performance. In the terminal section, the operators monitor only a fraction of the computer's teletype and high-speed data output. Here, special teletype conferences are set up using manual switching. It's been quite a job to keep ahead of the increasing demands of the space missions without interfering with those missions. The present million-circuit-mile voice and data system is a star configuration with its center at Goddard. Its form was set by the policies of the early planners to build a single communications system, avoiding costly duplication of facilities. So today, NASCOM is the bloodstream of the 3 principal tracking networks for Earth satellites, for manned flight, and for deep space.
Canberra STADAN, come in, please. This is Goddard 1. Canberra STADAN, come in, please.
Canberra, Australia, seat of government, science, and education. A modern planned city in the heart of the nation's beautiful southeast farmlands. 3 important NASA tracking stations are located deep in the mountains beyond the city. 20 miles out is a station of the Deep Space Instrumentation Facility, DSIF, a network which supports unmanned exploration of the moon and beyond. This 7-station network is operated for NASA by JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory of the California Institute of Technology. Further on, after a lively obstacle course followed by a perilous climb around the new road construction, you reach the Apollo station. This is one of the very large antennas which will support Apollo manned flight at lunar distance. The entire Apollo network consists of 16 stations, 5 ships, and 8 tracking planes. Past Apollo, you enter a land of parrots, wombats, kangaroos, and streams jumping with native trout. Finally, you reach the STADAN site. STADAN is short for Space Tracking and Data Acquisition Network. This 14-station network is responsible for all unmanned satellites this side of the moon. Canberra STADAN is a real space tracking factory, sprinkled with many types of antennas to handle the immense volume of data received daily.
Canberra STADAN, this is Goddard 1. Canberra STADAN, this is Goddard 1.
Canberra STADAN. Good morning. It is fast anyway.
Hi, Alex. We've got trouble out in Honolulu. We're going to bring up a pack through Africa. Would you bring up NAT 668, please, and stand by?
Right one, mate. Yes, sir, Sport.
As today's workload comes in, yesterday's goes out. Where were our satellites at instants of time? They were here, and here, and here. The data speeds to Goddard by teletype. And what did Oso, Geos, Alouette, Ogo, Explorer, and Pegasus see? They saw solar flares, and micrometeorites, and new shapes of the universe. That's what their signals tell us as they are recorded on magnetic tape. The findings of their persistent mapping of outer space are forwarded to Goddard by airmail, sometimes by data phone. There they are reduced to meaningful language for the computers. The product of all this effort appears as books like these. Books of experimental results. Then the books are sent back out around the world to the scientists who designed the experiments in the first place. Some of them at the Australian National University here at Canberra. The results inspire new ideas and new experiments. But meanwhile, a tracking station can only see this highly sophisticated research cycle as a rather tough day's work. Some of the assignments may call for taking data from the satellite by a radio process, which we call telemetry. Other assignments may call for measuring the satellite's precise location and speed by the process which we call tracking. Still other assignments may call for ordering the satellite to do something, which we call command. To top off this heavy schedule, Canberra is a prime first orbit station for today's Nimbus launch, which we call quite enough work for one day. Tracking, telemetry, command. The 3 tools basic to all ground station operations. Now, as the tracking supervisor heads back with his assignments, he passes through a field of stationary slot antennas for tracking. They read straight upwards in a fan-shaped pattern through which the satellite flies. A series of precise angles to the satellite's beacon is obtained as it flies through the fan. When you have enough angles, you can compute an orbit. Time is kept to extreme accuracies. In fact, all tracking stations are synchronized to this time signal from Denver. The tracking results appear on punched tape, ready for transmission by teletype. For weak or very distant signals, you can track with telemetry antennas which read over the entire sky and give you a fairly good orbit from just one pass. But the primary purpose of a large dish antenna like this is telemetry, the acquisition of data. The bigger the dish, the better it can hear. This one has 100,000 times the power of your home radio. STADAN stations are sprinkled with antennas of all sizes to permit recording many satellites at once. The problem is to neatly balance your tools against the day's traffic. 3, 4. Nimbus Nimbus is off, and now headed over the South Pole towards Canberra, where they send the first day's command to turn the Nimbus transmitter on.
Send.
Tracking, telemetry, command. By evening, the station has produced an impressive accumulation of data and positions. Very much the same thing has been going on at all of the other STADAN stations. In Fairbanks, Alaska. In Winkfield, England. In St. John's, Newfoundland. In Santiago, Chile. And in Johannesburg, South Africa, where the first fall winds are howling over the grasslands as rain and hail signal the end of the summer dry spell. It's just noon as the STADAN engineers begin heading down the hill to the mess hall at DSIF, the Deep Space Instrumentation Facility, one of the 7 JPL stations. Today, Johannesburg DSIF is taking data from Pioneer, a satellite in orbit around the sun, 140 million miles away. Whereas their STADAN neighbors gather data by the bushel, Deep Space uses every trick of electronics to nurse home each tiny fragment of information. Spacecraft such as Lunar Orbiter, Surveyor, or Mariner send us both data and photographs. At great distances, such as during the Mars flyby, the reception of a single photograph takes many hours, even though the method is not too different from the one by which your TV set gives you 30 pictures every second. To obtain the clearest possible signal over millions of miles, the Deep Space team pioneered the development of communications using ultra-high frequencies. Their breakthroughs in this uncharted field greatly advanced the state of the art and laid the foundations for other communication systems, primarily Apollo manned flight to the moon. A single antenna serves for both tracking and telemetry. In tracking, a tone is sent out which is converted in the spacecraft to another tone and sent back. Then the two tones are electronically compared. Like the sound of a train whistle going by, we get a Doppler shift caused by the spacecraft's movement towards or away from us. With such measurements, we can determine the spacecraft's distance to within a few miles and its velocity to within a few feet per second, even at these extraordinary speeds and distances. Now, as the Earth turns, Johannesburg is losing Pioneer, and arrangements are made to switch the responsibility to their sister station in California.
It's Goddard, right?
Track 5-1, over.
Good, don't go
Track
fast.
Station 5-1, be advised, we turned off our transmitter at 171502, and we are now in Dr. Charlie 3, over. Roger, Track, that is affirmative.
Roger, 5-1 out.
At JPL headquarters in Pasadena, California, Deep Space Control passes Pioneer to one of its 4 facilities on the Mojave Desert near Barstow, California. Mojave typifies NASA policy of co-location and cross-support. There's a major Apollo site for tracking at lunar distance, and just over the hill from that, a station of the STADAN network. Then you come upon the incredible Mars station of the Deep Space Network, one of the largest space probe antennas in the world, a paraboloidal dish 210 feet in diameter, a 2,500-ton football field floating on a gigantic circular bearing of oil. Now, as the Mars site quietly records signals bounced off Venus by one of the other dishes, Deep Space Network history is being made, far to the east. This is Madrid, Spain. 40 miles into the mountains near Robledo de Chavala, one of the 2 deep space sites focuses on the rising moon. In the control room, a command to the spacecraft Lunar Orbiter is ready.
You want to go ahead over the point and get ready for acquisition? Okay. Receiver, you're all set for acquisition, right? Receiver?
A mixed bit stream will be fired off to the moon at 64,000 bits per second.
Recommend second readout dry on command.
64, this is command coordinator.
Go.
Proceed with the second readout drive on.
2.5 seconds later, Lunar Orbiter responds.
Okay, video recorder on.
Roger, recorder on.
Roger, okay, this is the start of photo readout. Receiver, doing your signal.
Signal level minus 98.5.
Roger. Signal level minus 98.5.
In a total of less than 6 seconds, the new and startling photograph begins to come in.
Verified and executed.
At first, the technicians have only a suspicion, but the results will soon be on front pages around the world. The film is developed and quality checked on a microscope.
Tenemos los cráteres maravillosamente altos.
¿Qué tal se mira la Tierra?
Estupendamente, tenemos media tierra.
La resolución.
Perfecta, y la densidad aproximada.
Now they know for sure, even before the strips are fully laid up in mosaic form. It's a picture of the Earth, but not just the Earth. It's the Earth seen across the horizon of the moon.
Voice control.
Voice control, give me deep space operation.
Operation to Pasadena, please.
Oh, Roger. Stand by one. Pasadena,
We have Madrid on board. Photo, this is video. We've just finished making
A mosaic of the Earth shot, and it looks good. What we have here is an Earth shot with the moon in the foreground. The focus is good, the exposure is good. We can see detail. The shot's fantastic.
Great work, boys. That's terrific. We're real anxious to see it.
Tracking, telemetry, command. As Deep Space Controller, your attention is fixed not only on the needs of your own network, but on the needs of others as well.
voice control.
Manned Spacecraft Center, please. Network support team.
Manned Spacecraft Center, Houston. This is the home of astronaut training and Apollo control.
Houston, I see.
JPL control here. May I have a mission status report, please?
T plus 107 minutes. Third stage refire still looks good for
1548.
Roger, Houston. We can now confirm Goldstones and Canberra's readiness for Apollo support at $1,500.
Roger, JPL.
On acquisition, go remote and transmit Format 3 high-speed data.
When you enter the control center for manned flight, you have fully stepped into the world of real time, though everything may seem very unreal at first. Real time means simply right now time, or as close to it as we can get. The instrumentation controller monitors tracking station readiness and performance right now. The biomedical officer watches the astronauts' heartbeats and respiration right now. The flight director watches the swiftly changing position of the spacecraft right now. And the spacecraft communicator is talking with the astronauts right now, which is no surprise since their voices are coming from this test facility nearby, where they will spend many days flying to the moon and back without moving more than a few inches.
Fuel cell voltages and currents.
Roger. Onboard fuel cell 1, reading 29 volts, 9 amps.
For every hour of spaceflight, an astronaut may spend 100 in simulations. It's the same for the Apollo tracking stations. And these skill drills are so like the real thing that everyone easily forgets that they aren't. But today's simulation is only beginning. Theoretically, Apollo is still in Earth orbit, and the station at Carnarvon, West Australia, will be next to acquire. Directly from the Houston computers come predictions telling the wide-beam radars where to look. And as they lock on, the direction is automatically passed to the long-range, narrow-beam antennas.
Now, man, spacecraft valid C and S-band track.
CSM and IU-TM solid.
Flight Carnarvon, we have valid radar track and TM solid.
Roger.
Everything's real but the flight itself, and these dummy flight tapes take care of that. Simulations contain the types of complications which might occur during an actual flight.
Capcom, Sergeant. Go ahead, Sergeant.
Come on, pilot stage looks pretty good from here.
Roger.
GSC go, Capcom.
ECOM go, except for Field Cell 1.
Boosters go, Capcom. Apollo. Carnarvon, Capcom. On VHF.
Carnarvon, Apollo. We'd like for you to pull fuel cell 2 offline. We hope that we can increase the load on fuel cell 1 and bring its temp up.
Roger, stand by, Carnarvon.
As data comes in from the stations at Guam, Hawaii, Guaymas, Mexico, and Corpus Christi, Texas, computer displays at Houston indicate when the Earth, the Moon, and the spacecraft will all be in exactly the right place for refire into lunar transfer.
FFI system 1 and 2 receiver test lamps are not lighted.
Even a 1-second error here could be a massive error at lunar distance. The command is loaded at Apollo control at Houston and will be transmitted by the Atlantic ship. The tracking equipment on each of these 600-foot Apollo ships is roughly the same as you find on land, plus additional electronics to compute the effects of the ship's movements. Overhead, tracking planes of the Apollo network furnish further support during this critical maneuver. Now the spacecraft is go. The Atlantic ship systems are go. And from Houston comes the word. The mission is go for moonflight. At the precise moment the command is fired, and our astronauts observe their speed accelerate to over 25,000 miles per hour. For the bird is off the string, and tremendous forces are at work. Moonflight navigation is a mathematics jungle. It's something like trying to make a billiard shot on a spinning table in a revolving room. Without computers which can add a mile-high column of 7-digit numbers every second, it couldn't be done. As tracking data flows in, the computers display the time to fire the first mid-course correction. Out go the updates, commands to bring the onboard computer up to date. Through the communications network, to the tracking station's on-site computers, and out to the spacecraft. In this case, to the back room, of course, back into the simulation program. Meanwhile, the astronauts are practicing solutions of the same problems using their onboard computer and by taking star sights to obtain their position. Although they are equipped to find their way alone, their safety is directly proportionate to the capabilities of the Earth-based equipment and manpower backing them up. Now, the simulation program confirms that Apollo has technically entered moon orbit. In this way, we've really been there many times already. Tracking, telemetry, command. No question of they're doing fine. Back at Goddard, the Earth satellite controller keeps his eyes on the heartbeat of STADAN. In Quito, Ecuador, measurements of solar flare activity are being received from OSO, the orbiting solar observatory. In Madagascar, these range rate antennas are tracking IMP, the interplanetary monitoring platform. Now, Fairbanks, Alaska commands the new Nimbus to start its picture-taking operations. And 80 minutes later, Rosman, North Carolina, asks Nimbus what it saw over the Philippine Sea. It saw the makings of a typhoon. From North Carolina to Goddard, through Nimbus control to the Weather Bureau, the word goes out to 9 countries on the edge of Asia. In many places, such as at this meteorological station in Bombay, they don't have to wait. Using low-cost telemetry equipment, people all over the world can read our weather satellites as quickly as we do. Weather satellites even send this code, telling when and how to look for them next. 2,500 miles to the west, in the high plains near Addis Ababa, the operator of one of 12 optical sites looks with satisfaction at the clear sunset and prepares for a long night of picture-taking. Pictures showing satellite tracks pinpointed among the stars. This optical network is operated for NASA by the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory. The high resolution of these measurements is the most precise confirmation of radio tracking results. At Point Barrow, Alaska, and at Fort Churchill, Canada, sounding rockets blast off the rim of the Arctic Circle to study the aurora borealis. And the Apollo station at Madrid receives a model of the Apollo command module, part of an educational exhibit to be shown throughout Spain. Madrid has just confirmed that the astronauts have theoretically finished their simulated excursion to the moon's surface and have proceeded safely back aboard the command module. At voice control, the late shift returns to work for the second time as the most crucial phase of the manned flight begins.
Voice control.
This is Houston, IC. Give me Catfish Test Director.
Catfish Test Director.
Apollo is tearing back to Earth. As tracking planes spring to their stations at 37,000 feet, a readiness countdown for all re-entry Apollo sites and ships has begun. These tests are in addition to the continuous computerized testing which we call CADFIS, a system constantly at work, side by side with operational traffic. CADFIS automatically monitors equipment status at the remote sites, judges the quality of their data, and displays the results for Houston and Goddard. Now all stations, ships, and planes are go. Here comes Apollo for re-entry at a speed nearly twice that of Gemini flights. The return course corrections were computed to aim the spacecraft into a segment of the Earth's upper atmosphere only 40 miles thick. Too high, the spacecraft would miss Earth altogether. Too low, it would be lost. Suddenly, all communications with the spacecraft are cut off as the hot gases surrounding the heat shield black out their radio signals. This is the point in a 7,500-mile landing footprint when the spacecraft has braked its speed as much as it dares and must now skip out again to cool off. In the land of the blind, one eye is king, and the re-entry jets strive valiantly to keep contact. But it's no-go. Until the heat shield cools, the blackout ends, and the Pacific Ocean ship locks on. The computers go furiously to work. In mission control, the landing coordinates are displayed 15 minutes before it will happen. Now, from its spectacular perch above Waimea Canyon in Oahu, the Hawaii station locks on to track the spacecraft down. This is when the ships and planes would converge on the target area. But the game is played out as the astronauts splash down into the theoretical waters of the simulation lab. Around the world, following a lengthy critique, the stations unwind. Get a good rest, boys. The next simulation is soon to follow.
Flight Control, we're finished with the worldwide network. Thank you very much for your help. Roger, and thank you, Houston. Attention London, Australia, and Honolulu. All centers can now go back on their normal non-mission configuration. Roger, Goddard. Cape mission test, Goddard voice. Go ahead. Roger, mission test. We're finished with the order wire and breaking.
As each mission ends, others have already begun.
We're terminating Houston conference now.
Day by day, these men are helping to build a future in space for generations to follow.
We're terminating Houston conference now. Thank you very much.
The further you go into space, the more tracking becomes the vital link in bringing you and your findings back.